Trump has trashed America's most important airlines. The rift with Europe could take decades to repair. CNN, the presidency of Donald Trump has left such a rich stench in Europe that it's hard to see how, even in 4 years, Joe Biden could possibly get America's most important airlines back on track. This week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo canceled a final trip to meet with European and NATO leaders. While the department claims the reason for his cancellation was so Pompeo could work on the Biden transition. European officials suspect that America's top diplomat realized he'd arranged in leaving party no one wants to attend. Throughout Trump's thumb, Europeans have been working a tightrope, trying to balance outright condemnation of the president's most destructive behavior with not alienating the leader of the Western world. Pompeo was unlikely to be received warmly in his farewell tour, even before the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last Wednesday. For many, Trump's incitement of a rioter was the final straw. The foreign minister of Luxembourg openly called Trump's pyromaniac, while diplomats are privately saying they blame Trump squarely for the chaos in the America since the election, including the Capitol riot, as one did to CNN, reflecting the sentiments of others in the same role. It was clearly not going to be a congenial trip, as many European institutions and diplomats are happily turning their back on the Trump administration. It's no secret that Europe is very much looking forward to working with Biden, said Tyson Baker, a, a senior analyst and former State Department official under Barack Obama. This week's snoof of Pompeo brings an ignominious end to 4 years of exacerbation, with the White House that went out of its way to burn bridges with allies who are caught off guard by the election of Trump, then horrified at his administration's inability to rein in his worst instinct. From our perspective, Trump saw Europe as an enemy, a senior European diplomat told CNN. The lasting impact of America First is the US having fewer friends in Europe. A senior European Union official said the general view in Brussels was that Trump went out of his way to gradually undo a lot of what the EU was working toward on the world stage, pointing specifically to the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord. While the assumption is that the transatlantic transatlantic relationship will improve under Biden. 4 years of carnage has spooked the European political scene. The European relationship has changed and will now be shrouded, shrouded in skepticism, said Kathleen Kluber Ashbrook, executive director of the Project on Europe and Transatlantic Relationship at the Harvard Kennedy School. The arrival Biden administration has yet to be embraced with the same fanfare as Obama and as a president-elect because Trump has done more damage to the relationship than George W. Bush. Trump's outward aggression affected all aspects of European life, be it trade, defense, or even the emotional shared ideas and cultural ties. Although things suddenly seem devastated and all of less value, the repudiation of shared ideas and cultural ties Kluwer describes are one prong of the fork that has punctured the airlines. According to Baker, officials in European capital was ego at the type of people Trump employed to work as envoys overseas. Europeans have considered the last 4 years extremely distasteful. They have been bemused, bemused by Trump's envoys like Richard Grenell in Germany, who have turned up and started behaving like Fox News' Archer and inserting the countries they were supposed to be building relations with the Versailles. Another flaw has been the practical implication of Trump's approach to foreign policy. Trump's disengagement and howling out of the State Department meant that we were suddenly without our most important ally on projects in the Middle East and Africa, a senior German diplomat told CNN. When they did take a big stance on things like China or Iran, they choose not to involve anyone, leaving Europeans and scrambling for a response. The diplomat added. Kluber says this has forced a structural change in the dynamics between allies. Europeans have had to carry the can on things like the Iran deal and climate change. On one hand, this means the Bidens can pick up where Obama left off with some serious American muscle, but he might have to accept that America's role in these relations has changed. Barker agreed, saying it would be important to see how the new administration acknowledges the damage that has been done by Trump to America's reputation. And on top of the big picture issues like Iran and China, Barker said, how can Biden send State Department officials to Ukraine to warn about corruption with any immediate credibility? This idea that Europe has lost its trust in America comes up time and again when speaking to European diplomats and EU officials. Kluwer believes the combination of unpredictability from the White House and the U.S. bureaucracy being dismantled from the inside to make it less effective worldwide under Trump's means we have crossed the Rubicon. America's influence in European defense, security, and other global priorities has diminished. This has led to a lot of countries having to think more seriously about their future with a less assertive US, she added. Despite the optimism that Biden will restore a more collaborative uh, approaches to shared priorities, European diplomats and officials are adamant that moves towards independent defense policy and international strategic autonomy will not slow down. In some respect, it was a good thing Trump forced us to think more about diplomatic initiative, NATO, and withdrawal of US troops, said the German diplomat. It might come as a shock to Biden, but the prospect of the US underpinning European security is not as attractive as it was when he and Obama left office. A view many European officials share is that no matter how friendly Biden is, Trump happened once, and it could happen again. The president lost the election, but clearly there is still a lot of support for his politics. In 2024, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Mike Pompeo, or any other of his allies could conceivably pick up the torch and win an election. We cannot afford to be naive. If you look at the number of votes that Trump got, he will influence in American voters. This anti-global America First undercurrent in American politics is still very much alive, and we have to hedge our bet, said the EU diplomat. Kluber is equally convinced that Trump's supporters is going nowhere, not least because they are unlike traditional voters. A lot of his followers have been radicalized by conspiracy theories spread by groups like QAnon, she said. Even if Biden succeeds in his domestic agenda, it will be difficult to fool people away from Trump's movement. Worse, elected representative who wants to bank on their support in the midterm and might continue pander to them. If this sound a little gloomy to some extent it is. Bush was supposed to be an evaluation and Obama a restoration, said Burker. This idea of a recess seems a much tougher sell, especially since Trump used his lame duck period to burn the house on the way out. It takes a it takes more than 4 years for the fog to lift over the Atlantic, and there are fears the relationship between Europe and America will never go back to what it was. For Europeans, that is reality they are determined to make the best of. For the US, it's unclear whether being downgraded as a diplomatic force is something that its citizens who who've lived through 4 introspective years of America First will even care about. Regardless, the Trump era has left Europeans with little choice but to wait and see how much of a priority Biden places on reclaiming America's place on the world stage. And they will use the 4 years of relative quiet under Biden to build a safeguard against the all too real possibility of another Eurosceptic Firestarter winning the White House in 2024.